everybody. I'm Hillary Atkin from the Atkin Report, and I'm really happy to welcome Jack C. Newell from the feature film Monuments to this edition of Hillary's Happy Hour. Jack, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much. I've got to tell you, your film Monuments now is down in my personal history book because it is the first feature film I have seen in a movie theater in 15 months. I saw it at the Royal in Los Angeles, and Jack, it was thrilling to be there to see this film on the big screen. And everyone, I'm sorry you couldn't be there, but many people in the film were there, and it was a fantastic premiere.
I mean, you're just hearing you talk about it is giving me like goosebumps and sort of taking my breath away because it's reminding me of that experience for me personally, but also I'm just really touched that we got to be your first movie back in a movie theater. Like that's amazing. Like I feel so humbled and honored to be able to to be that because you'll always remember that. So that's awesome. And luckily, it wasn't like, oh man, the first movie I saw after pandemic totally stunk. Like I hated it. Which would be, potentially one thing that could happen. But it's also great too because, we really wanted to make the movie to have a theatrical, and that might sound dumb to say, but the world's changed and a lot of people's movies don't get a chance to be seen in the theatrical experience. And so for us to be able to do that, like because you saw it this way, like we really tried to use the whole frame and try to bring the only things you can only do with movies to that experience. So I'm just like I'm tickled that's how you got to experience it and that you liked it so much. Yeah.
I did. Well, I want you to tell the audience about the storyline of the film, which involves humor, grief, family drama, even some magical realism. But what is it based on and how did you develop it?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be completely, open and honest with you right now, when I was my senior year of high school and in my first year of college, I suffered some loss. My mom and my brother both passed away in relative short succession. And so I say that only as sort of prologue. And, without going too far into that, you could understand how that had an incredible impact on who I was and all that. I'll also say grief is not something that you necessarily like get over where all of a sudden it's like, I'm better, Um, and so it's something I've always dealt with and I'm always processing and always will. And it's part of who I am. It's part of what makes me who I am today. And it's also, you think about the path of who you would have been had that not happened. And so that's all that. And then fast forward to a couple of years ago now, and I'm married, newly married, and my mother-in-law is a writer and she knows I'm a filmmaker. And she was like, oh, I wrote this short story like 15 years ago. And the short story that she wrote was about a man and a woman who are like having dinner with some friends, and the conversation leads them to, if you died, what would you want to have done with your ashes? And the woman says, well, if I died, I'd want to be scattered at this museum. And she dies in the short story, and the man scatters her ashes there.
I've been seeing her, Laura.
She's gone, man.
We've got to do what we need to do to put her to rest and move on.
What?
I want to report a stolen car.
Rochambeau.
From the scatter, we were the happiest. Chicago's the answer.
And I read the story, and it really affected me, and it's a very simple short story. I mean, it's like 3-4 pages, and it was like her first draft sort of thing. So it was like very rough, but I read it and I was like, I think there's enough here. There's a story or a plot here that I can use to explore these things that I've been dealing with for 15 years or so. And then that's the generation point for it. So how did I taking the story and developing it out to all these things which it is. And that comes into, I like movies of the 60s, 70s, 40s, 50s. I like that sort of style of filmmaking. I have a humorous sort of point of view on the world. And so I just sort of iterated on that till we got to a spot where this is this film script that we wrote and made.
Well, talk to us about working with your lead actors, Marguerite Moreau, David Sullivan, and Javier Munoz.
Gosh, I mean, where to start? I mean, they were amazing. you know, David, I'll start with David because he's the lead of the film. And you mentioned just all the different things that happen. I mean, this guy, he has to do intense drama. He has to do slapstick comedy. He has to do action scenes. He has to do nuance and broad. I mean, he does everything. I mean, this movie is almost like an incredible acting reel for David, because I mean, it shows his unbelievable range, because he's able to do all this stuff and do it completely believably and enjoyably, which I think is amazing. I mean, he was a treat. They're all amazing to work with. You know, Marguerite has to play a person who's basically dead the entire time. And so how do you approach that as an actor? Because there's no real way for that. I mean, you can pretend like you're, you know, a hockey player or whatever. You can pretend as an actor, you can sort of build those circumstances, but she had to do this in a way where it's like the rules don't apply to you anymore because you're dead. I mean, you're gone, you know? And so, and she does it also believably. And Javier, I mean, he's just like the most amazing sort of force of nature you could possibly ever expect to be able to collaborate with, both as an actor on screen, but as a human being. He's just like a lovely human being, and like the nicest guy in the world. Of course, I feel like the bad guys in movies always, like, as soon as you stop rolling camera, are like just the nicest, most gentle, you know, sweet people you can meet.
Well, Marguerite has mentioned that she felt like playing someone who's dead was an extremely freeing experience.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting way to approach it. And just as a viewer, it was thrill, you know, because you know that she is dead. And I loved her performance. And also the supporting cast, the family members, were all incredible.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, they're all from Chicago, and Chicago's got a really great sort of stable of, I would say, under-recognized talent. Not to throw shade on anywhere else in the world, but like just incredible people. And just to go back to Marguerite real quick, I think I agree with you. And the other thing we wanted to try and do, which was hard, is that a lot of times you'll find when you're dealing with a character, and if it's a woman who dies in the movie, like they really try to push that either into like Manic Pixie Dream Girl territory, where she was just this, you know, effervescent sort of thing, or the relationship was perfect and then they died. And what we wanted to try to do was, you know, the relationship isn't perfect when the movie starts, and she's fighting for what she wants for her relationship, and it's not clean. And in the dirtiness, I think movies want to a lot of time move towards cleanliness. Like they want to make it as clean and clear as possible, so there's no room for like anyone in the audience to be at all confused. But this movie, we try to make it dirty because that reflects my reality, that there's, when you lose someone, and it doesn't even have to be death, when you break up with someone, or you, whatever the situation might be, there are always things unsaid, and there's always things you wanted to do, and there's always that sort of like residue that's unresolved. The advantage in this movie is that we then get to play in that space, because all the things that go unresolved, he then gets to have an opportunity to sort of explore with her when she comes back to him, you know, as a ghost.
Absolutely. So I understand that the structure of the film changed a great deal during the editing process, the post-production process.
Yeah, so I sort of thought it was going to happen that way, to be completely honest. But when we were getting close to production, I didn't want to rewrite the script to make it nonlinear, because then it just opens up a can of worms. And the way in which we shot it, I sort of all the time was thinking like, I think we're going to change up the time on this. But it really came into when we screened the film, because when I make films, I test screen it a lot. So we were doing these test screenings, and the way it was originally written in the script was that the dance sequence happened about 45 minutes the way through the film. And really the simplest version to tell the story was that it's just too late for that scene to happen in this movie. And so if you watch this with that in mind, you know, it happens right now, I think at like 16 or 18 minutes in. And it's really just trying to, you know, really make sure the audience knows like, this is the kind of movie that you're watching here, as opposed to like a huge stylistic break about halfway through.
Yeah, that was a great scene. But so the movie is playing in theaters now across the country, but tell us about the plans for Rollout and how people can see this if they cannot make it physically to a movie theater.
Absolutely. So if you are in one of the cities where the film is playing in person, which if you go to Row House's website, rowhousefilms.com/monuments, you can find where it's playing at a theater near you. They are also doing a virtual screening room options. So you could, if you live in Boise, Idaho, for example, or somewhere else that it's not playing, you could rent it via any of the theaters in the country. And then starting in August, the film will be available on VOD. So all the different VOD platforms.
Well, I'm so excited for you, and we are wrapping up our happy hour, Jack. So I wanted to propose a toast to the success of Monuments.
I'll drink to that. Thank you so much, Hillary. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.